Get that dog out of here now, the warden hissed, but our canine wouldn't budge. We were at my partner's funeral, surrounded by hundreds of officers in dress blues, but the dog was acting like he was on a live raid. He wasn't mourning, he was lunging at the closed coffin, barking at the wood with a ferocity that made my blood run cold. That's when I noticed it. A tiny bead of condensation forming on the polished seal of the lid. The dog wasn't saying goodbye. He was trying to tell us that the man inside was still breathing. If you've ever seen a dog react in a place where silence is expected, stay with me. And if a dog has ever refused to accept what everyone else already believed, tell me in the comments. Stories like this are why people subscribe here. I'll recount this carefully, because no one there was prepared for what happened next. The service was quiet, formal, controlled, uniforms pressed, flags folded with precision, everything moving according to protocol. The coffin rested at the front of the room, closed, final. The K9 sat beside it at first, rigid, focused, eyes locked on the polished wood. Not whining, not restless, watching. The handler thought it was grief. Everyone did. The dog had worked with the officer for years, lived beside him, learned his voice, his footsteps, the rhythm of his breathing. No one expected calm. What they didn't expect was escalation, because after several minutes the dog stood, and once he did, he refused to stop barking. Not confused barking, not distressed barking, urgent, directional, like he was trying to wake someone who wasn't supposed to wake up. At first they tried to calm him the way they always did, a quiet command. A hand on the shoulder, a low, steady voice meant to ground. The dog ignored all of it. He stood inches from the coffin, muscles locked, tail rigid, barking in sharp bursts that cut clean through the hush of the room. Each bark landed the same way, aimed, focused, never drifting. Easy, the handler whispered, embarrassed, pulling lightly on the leash. Easy. The dog didn't even turn his head. He lunged forward instead, paws scraping against the polished wood, nails clicking as he braced himself and barked again. Louder now, the sound echoed off the walls, bouncing back at him like he was in a confined space. A few heads turned, then more. "This isn't appropriate," someone muttered. A senior officer stepped closer. "Take him out," he said quietly. "Now." The handler tried open. He tightened the leash and gave a firm command, one the dog had followed without hesitation 1,000 times before. The dog resisted, not pulling wildly, not panicking, planting. He leaned his weight forward, lowering his chest slightly, positioning his body between the handler and the coffin like the leash didn't matter. The handler felt it immediately. His stomach dropped. That posture wasn't grief, it was alert. "Sir," the handler said, voice tight. "He's not. This isn't." The dog barked again, louder, then pressed his nose hard against the seam of the coffin lid. He sniffed once, twice, deep, urgent pulls of air, then barked directly at the wood. A ripple of unease moved through the room. Someone whispered, "What's wrong with him?" The handler crouched instinctively, eyes tracking the dog's behavior instead of the room. "He's not reacting emotionally," he said under his breath. "He's working." "Working on what?" the officer snapped. The dog pawed at the lid, once, hard enough to make a dull thud. The handler's pulse spiked. He grabbed the leash shorter, not to restrain, but to feel the dog's tension through it. The line vibrated with contained energy. The hound barked again. Then he did something that made the handler freeze. He stopped barking. Just for a second, he tilted his head, ears forward, listening, not to the room but to the coffin. Then he barked again, faster now, sharper, like he was responding to something no one else could hear. "Hold on," the handler said, louder this time. "Hold on." A medic in the back frowned. "What do you mean, hold on?" The handler swallowed. "This dog is trained to detect live human scent," he said. "Breath, heat, micro movement." "That's impossible," someone said immediately. The dog lunged again, front paws hitting the lid with a hollow knock. The sound stopped all conversation. Silence fell, thick and sudden. The handler's voice dropped. He's not trained to bark at coffins. A senior officer stepped closer, eyes narrowed. Are you suggesting? The dog barked again and pawed at the exact same spot, nose pressed tight to the seam. The handler felt his hands go cold. He pressed his ear closer to the coffin without thinking. He didn't hear anything, but the voice barked again and again. The handler straightened slowly. Sir, he said, steady but pale, we need to check this. A murmur spread through the room. Disbelief, anger, confusion. This is a funeral, someone hissed. The dog dropped into a low stance, chest near the floor, you see, barking now in short, rapid bursts, urgency climbing. Get him out, a voice said. He's disrupting. No, the handler said firmly. He's telling us something. A medic stepped forward, eyes fixed on the coffin. If there's even a chance. The dog barked again, louder than before, then pawed hard enough that the lid shifted just a fraction. The handler's breath caught. Open it, the medic said quietly. Now. The room froze. The dog didn't bark this time. He stood perfectly still, waiting. No one moved at first. The command, open it, hung in the air like something no one wanted to be responsible for. The dog broke the silence. He barked once, sharp, final, not pleading, not panicked, certain. The handler tightened his grip on the leash, not to pull the dog away, but to keep him steady. His heart hammered as he looked from the cave to the coffin and back again. I know how this sounds, he said quietly, voice carrying farther than he expected. But he's never done this. Not once. Not at a memorial. Not in training. Not ever. The dog stepped sideways, positioning himself directly in front of the coffin, blocking anyone who tried to step too close without permission. A senior officer approached cautiously. He's guarding it, he murmured. Yes, the handler said, which means he thinks someone inside still needs protecting. A wave of discomfort moved through the room. A woman near the back covered her mouth. That's not possible. The dog barked again, then lowered his head and sniffed along the seam of the lid, moving slowly, deliberately, mapping something invisible. He stopped at one corner and pawed once. Same spot. Again. Check the seal, the medic said, already pulling on gloves. The dog immediately shifted his stance, allowing the medic closer, but only him. When another officer stepped in too quickly, the dog barked and repositioned, shoulder blocking the path. Easy, the handler whispered. Good boy. The medic crouched and pressed his fingers lightly against the wood. Cold, he said, but... He hesitated. There's condensation. Someone scoffed nervously. That happens. Not like this, the medic replied. The dog barked again and nudged the medic's shoulder, harder now, urging him upward. The medic stood abruptly. Get the tools. The handler's stomach churned. Sir, he said to the senior officer, if this is nothing, and if it isn't, the officer interrupted quietly, they brought the tools quickly. No ceremony, no announcement. The room had gone completely silent now. Even the bond had stopped barking. He sat, eyes fixed on the coffin, watching. The handler knelt beside him. You're okay, he whispered. I'm here. The dog's body trembled, not with fear, but with control. Every muscle was coiled, ready. The first latch was undone. Click. The dog's ears snapped forward. The second latch followed. Click. A murmur rippled through the crowd, held breaths, whispered prayers, disbelief pressing against reality. The medic paused, hand hovering over the lid. The dog stood. He stepped forward and placed one paw gently on the wood. Not clawing, not scratching, touching. The handler felt tears sting his eyes. He's asking you to hurry, he said. The medic nodded and lifted. The lid opened just a few inches. Air rushed in. The dog barked. Once. Loud enough to make everyone flinch. The medic leaned in, eyes widening. Oh my God, he whispered. The handler couldn't see yet. He only saw the dog's reaction. The dog lunged forward, not in aggression but urgency, pawing at the opening, barking again, tail rigid, body straining toward the gap. There's movement, the medic said, voice shaking. The dog barked again, Higher now, frantic but focused. "Get him out!" someone shouted. "No," the handler snapped. "He's right." The lid was lifted fully now, and suddenly everything changed. The room didn't erupt. It collapsed inward. People leaned forward without realizing it. Others stepped back instinctively, hands over mouths, eyes wide and unblinking. Inside the coffin, the officer's chest moved. Barely, but unmistakably. A shallow rise. A pause. Then another. "He's breathing?" the medic said, voice breaking the spell. "He's still breathing." The dog barked again. Short, sharp, then whined for the first time since the service began. Not fear. Relief edged with urgency. He pawed at the edge of the coffin, tail rigid, eyes locked on the man inside. "Get oxygen!" someone shouted. The handler dropped to his knees beside the coffin, hands shaking as he reached out. "Stay with me," he whispered to the officer. "You're not alone." The dog pressed his head against the officer's shoulder, whining softly now, breath fast, body vibrating with contained energy. Medics surged forward, equipment clattering, voices overlapping. The dog backed half a step when asked, but only half. He stayed close enough to touch, close enough to feel every shallow breath. "This shouldn't be possible," someone whispered. The medic didn't answer. He was already working, checking pulse, opening airway, fitting an oxygen mask with hands that trembled despite years of training. The dog watched every movement. When the medic's hands moved too fast, the dog barked once. Warning, not aggression. When the oxygen mask slipped, the dog nudged the medic's arm insistently with his nose until it was repositioned. "Good boy," the handler whispered, tears streaking his face. "Good boy." The officer coughed, a wet, broken sound, but real. The room gasped as one. The dog barked again, this time high, sharp, almost triumphant, then licked the officer's cheek once, gently, like he was reminding him how to breathe. "We need to move him," the medic said urgently. "Now." As they lifted the officer from the coffin, the dog stayed glued to his side, matching every step, every turn. When a gurney was brought in, the dog positioned himself between the wheels and the officer's head, guarding him even as hands worked fast around him. Outside, sirens wailed. Inside, time warped. Someone dropped to their knees in prayer. Another officer stood frozen, staring at the coffin as if it had betrayed everything he believed about finality. The handler walked with the wig as they rushed the officer down the aisle, past flags, past chairs, past a stunned crowd that had come to say goodbye and was now watching a man fight his way back. The dog never looked back. At the ambulance, the dog jumped in without hesitation and curled himself tight against the officer's side, nose pressed to his chest, ears tracking every breath. "Is he allowed?" a paramedic asked. The handler didn't hesitate. "He's not leaving." No one argued. As the doors closed and the sirens screamed to life, the dog let out a low, steady sound, not a bark, not a whine, a hum. The handler recognized it immediately. Grounding. The dog wasn't alert anymore. He was regulating. The ambulance pulled away. The room they left behind was silent in a way funerals never are. Not grief, shock, because everyone there understood the same impossible truth. The dog hadn't refused to say goodbye. He'd refused to accept that it was over. If you're still here, it's because you can feel how close this came to ending the wrong way. If you've ever trusted an animal when logic said it was too late, tell me in the comments. And subscribe, because what happens next is where instinct becomes loyalty. The world shrank to the back of the ambulance. Not the siren, not the lights, not the rush of the road beneath them. Just one dog, one man, one fragile rhythm of breath. The officer lay motionless except for the faint rise of his chest under the oxygen mask. Tubes ran from his arms. Monitors beeped in soft, urgent patterns. Every sound felt too loud, too sharp. The dog stayed pressed against him, body curved protectively, head resting near the officer's shoulder. His eyes never left the man's face. Counting, waiting. The handler sat on the bench opposite, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles burned. He'd worked with this dog for years, seen him in raids, searches, chaos. He had never seen him like this. This wasn't training. This wasn't command. This was attachment. The dog lifted his head when the officer's breathing faltered just for a second and nudged the medic's leg with his nose. The medic glanced at the monitor, swore softly, and adjusted the mask. "Good catch," he murmured. The dog settled again. At the hospital, doors flew open. Hands reached in, voices layered over each other. The dog moved only when guided, and even then, reluctantly, never letting the officer out of sight. When they finally had to separate them at the emergency doors, the dog planted his paws and refused. The handler knelt. "Hey," he whispered. "I'm here. He needs help now." The dog looked from the handler to the officer, then back again. Slowly, carefully, he stepped back. But he didn't sit. He waited. Hours passed in fragments. Paper cups of cold coffee, hard chairs, quiet updates that didn't say much at all. The handler sat with the dog at his feet, one hand resting on his back, feeling the tension there. Steady, unbroken. "They're working on him," a nurse said gently. "That's all we know." The dog stood and paced once, then sat, then stood again, waiting. Finally, a doctor appeared. "Are you the canine handler?" she asked. "Yes," he said immediately. She hesitated. "It's unusual, but we think your dog saved his life." The handler's throat closed. "He was pronounced," she continued carefully. "Barely. His vitals were so low they were almost missed. The delay, because of the dog now, she gave us a window." The dog's ears flicked at the sound of her voice. "Can he see him?" was the handler asked. The doctor looked at the dog, then nodded. Briefly. They led them down a quiet hallway. The officer lay in a bed now, wires and monitors everywhere, color returning slowly to his face. Machines breathed for him, with him. The dog approached the bed and stopped. Waited. The handler nodded. "It's okay." The dog stepped closer and rested his head gently against the officer's hand. The officer didn't wake, but his fingers twitched, just slightly. The dog froze, then leaned in closer, breathing slow, steady, present, like he was teaching the man how to stay. In that room, with everything stripped down to essentials, one truth became clear. This wasn't a miracle. It was persistence, a dog who refused to stop saying, "He's still here," until someone finally listened. They didn't make promises. Doctors rarely do. What they said instead was quieter and somehow heavier. "He has brain activity. He's responding to stimuli. He's stable, for now." For most people, "for now" would have felt like nothing. For the babug, it was everything. He lay on the floor beside the bed, head resting near the officer's hand, eyes half open but alert. Every monitor beep passed through him. Every change in rhythm registered in the way his ears flicked or his breathing adjusted. He wasn't sleeping. He was standing watch. The handler stayed nearby, saying very little. There was nothing left to explain, no commands to give. The dog had moved beyond training hours ago. This was personal. Late that night, when the hallway lights dimmed and the hospital settled into its strange, restless quiet, the officer's fingers moved again. Not a twitch this time, a curl. The nurse froze mid-step. "Did you see that?" The handler's breath caught. "Yes." The dog lifted his head instantly and pressed his nose gently against the officer's hand, breathing slow and steady, grounding him the way he always had after difficult calls. The officer's lips parted. A sound came out, rough, broken, barely there, but real. The nurse hit the call button. The room filled with people again, controlled urgency, practiced movements, voices layered but calm. The dog didn't interfere. He knew the difference now. He stayed close, but out of the way, watching the officer's face, tail still, body calm. "He's coming back," the doctor said quietly, almost to herself. The handler felt his knees weaken and sat down hard in the chair. The dog glanced at him once, then back to the officer. By morning, the officer was breathing on his own, weak, shallow, but his own. They said it would be a long road. Recovery, therapy, questions no one could answer yet. None of that mattered to the dog. What mattered was this: the officer was alive. When they finally allowed the mice back onto the bed, just for a moment, The dog climbed up carefully, placing his weight so gently it barely shifted the sheets. He lay down beside the officer's side, chin resting on the mattress. The officer's eyes fluttered open, confused, distant. Then they focused on the dog. A breath caught in his throat. His hand lifted weakly and found fur. The dog didn't move. He stayed perfectly still, like he was afraid that even breathing too hard might pull the man back into silence. "You," loud, the officer rasped. A few people laughed through tears. The handler turned away. Later, when the room emptied and the noise receded again, the dog finally slept. Deeply, the kind of sleep that only comes after a task is truly finished. The handler watched him and thought about the service, the flags, the folded finality of it all. How close they'd come to being wrong. Not because of malice, not because of carelessness, but because sometimes life hides where it's hardest to look. And sometimes the only one who refuses to look away is a dog. The funeral was never rescheduled. Instead, weeks later, there was something else. A quiet gathering. No uniforms, no ceremony. Just people standing in a hospital hallway as an officer, still unsteady, still healing, walked out into daylight. The dog walked beside him. Same pace, same focus, still working. Someone whispered, "That's the dog." Someone else answered, "Yeah, that's the one." The handler watched them go and felt something settle in his chest. Not relief, respect, because the dog hadn't done the unthinkable. He'd done the inevitable. He'd listened when others couldn't. He'd insisted when silence felt easier. He'd barked when the world was ready to move on. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you that sometimes instinct speaks louder than certainty, subscribe so these moments don't get buried under silence. And tell me in the comments, would you have listened when everyone else was ready to close the lid? They came to bury a hero, but his dog wasn't finished saving him yet.